We're so excited that you're joining us today for this amazing session that's going to cover strategic planning for long-term success. My name's Gabby, and I'm a member of the sales team here at Branching Minds. And it is my delight to help kick off this session and, of course, introduce you to our presenter today. But before I do so, let me just review a few housekeeping tips for you all. If you scroll just below the video, you should see a link to the PDF of today's sessions. Feel free to click on that, download, follow along, and you can save those slides for your reference. And then to the right of my video, just like Danielle had mentioned, where the chat is, you'll see events, agenda, and session. Make sure that you are clicked on the session tab just to make sure you're engaging with us here, engaging with Danielle, and it doesn't go to everybody out in the entire summit event. Underneath that session tab, we do encourage you to be active in the chat. I'll be monitoring for any questions that we can answer. But if you have anything specific, a specific Q&A that you want, click under Q&A, put your questions in there, and then I'll make sure that we can address those at the end. Okay, so without further ado, let me introduce you to our presenter today, joining us from Southwest ISD in San Antonio, Texas. She's got a lot of big cheering squad in the chat team already. Please help me welcome Danielle Aliano. She's a former fifth grade teacher. And as a former fifth grade teacher myself, I feel like we already have a bond. So Danielle, take it away.
All righty. So I hope everybody's here for our strategic planning and long-term success session today. We're going to be talking about the timeline and kind of what Southwest ISD has done or what I've done within Southwest ISD. A little background on myself. I'm the MTSS RTI coordinator for Southwest ISD in San Antonio, Texas. I taught fifth grade for 5 years, was an administrator for 3 years, and I'm now starting my 4th year in this position. And I'll actually be graduating on Saturday with my doctoral degree in educational leadership and policy studies. So super excited about that. One more check done, got this finished thing going on. So our overview for this session, we're, like I said, talking about Southwest ISD, how we've strategically planned and implemented shifting people from RTI to MTSS, how we, what's kind of our 5-year strategic plan, what have we done so far, what's been, successful, kind of what's still works in progress. I am going to put a quick poll into your poll. I'm going to publish that right now. And I'm just going to ask you guys real quick, on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being super excited to be here today, how are you feeling today? Let's see. Got some 4s, some 5s. It's good to know. I always worry about those ones that are 1s and 2s. I know it's here in San Antonio, 11:19, and everybody's like, okay, training. It's almost lunchtime, though, for us. All righty. So let's move forward. Really looking at, give you a brief kind of overview of what Southwest ISD is all about and who we are. Currently, we have 14,225 students with 11 elementary schools, 4 middle schools, 2 comprehensive high schools, and 1 CASTEM high school. We are 19.1% emergent bilingual students, 18.4% special education students, and 10.8% gifted and talented students. Overall, we are actually a Title I district due to our overall economically disadvantaged population. We have everything from rural countryside folks all the way into almost inner city San Antonio type folks. We have 3 elementary schools that are actually inside Loop 410. If you know San Antonio, you know that's inside of that inner loop. And so it's a very interesting dynamic with our district. And it's one of the reasons why I love working at Southwest as well. So we use currently Panorama to track our MTSS RTI documentation. So this is a little snapshot over here on the right of our students and where we at right now. where we can see that 69% of our students have no plan at all receiving Tier 1 instruction, while 12% of our students are receiving some sort of Tier 2 intervention, and 5% are receiving some sort of Tier 3. That receiving other tier intervention would be our House Bill 4545 or House Bill 1416 students. So if you're from Texas, you know that that is our accelerated instruction that's mandated by the legislators at this point in time. So really getting into it, how do we start this work? What do we do to get this work started? During year one, I kind of was doing a lot of data digging and figuring out, okay, what do we do well? What are some things that we need to work on? What are some of the things that we could do better? And within this, I found the Branching Minds infrastructure coaching series and took full advantage of it. I was able to do a lot of pre-planning. We did a roots report, getting down to like the root causes of things. How are our campuses feeling about implementation, about universal screeners? Do we have what we need? Things like that. So it was really interesting. The PDF of the slides has all these links in there for you guys, so you can kind of look at and see what we did and how we did it, and as well as getting the link to the Branching Minds infrastructure series and perusing that for yourself if you haven't already. During that roots analysis, we kind of figured out what are our strengths, needs, opportunities, and barriers at the elementary level and in the secondary level. This is the 1920 kind of school year. So it was right at COVID time, trying to figure out, okay, what's going on with our students, what's going on with our staff. Our strength was, felt that early interventions can lead to less referrals to special education needs. Staff felt that we needed more staff to support MTSS. Opportunities that arise were needing to standardize our processes, getting the alignment going, training, and having some sort of RTI leadership within the district as well as campuses. Under barriers for elementary, it was time. Time is always going to be one of those barriers. How do we find time to train people? How do we find time to intervene? How do we find time to talk about students and those types of things? And then communication, having clear lines of communication, one direction, that clarity as well, and then district consistency. Our secondary schools felt early interventions can lead to less referrals, so on the same level as our elementaries. But staff felt that we needed more staff as well as more training opportunities. Same thing, standardization, alignment, training, RTI leadership. Barriers, same barriers as well at the secondary level. Going into what our path to success was and what we've done, like I said, this is year 4 for me. So I like to say that I can see the Titanic starting to turn away from that iceberg. And we're doing a good job of starting to do that. So really talking about making those data-driven decisions at every step in that process, collaborating consistently across grade levels, schools, as well as the district, problem solving for student support, guided by best practices in MTSS, understanding student strengths, challenges across academic, cognitive, social, emotional, and behavioral needs and areas, and then immediate access and to understand the support plan, its implementation and effectiveness, as well as helping students succeed quickly and easily. One of the things I said it yesterday during the pre-conference, I'll say it again today, MTSS it changes adults. It does not change students. If we can get the adults to understand what is MTSS, students get the support that they need. And that's the biggest thing that I've been doing for the last 4 years, is really focusing on how can I get the adults to change, not the students. So year 1, what was our focus? Really focusing on increasing that knowledge base of what MTSS is all about. Did a lot of district level training on our new platform. Like I said, we were in eSped, which was clunky and kind of hard to maneuver, and it was not fun to do MTSS within, let's just say that. And we moved over into Panorama Student Success. And so we started launching a lot of training, getting people involved in that and seeing what it looks like. And then we started doing what I call program reviews to find strengths and weaknesses. Within that, what was successful, those program reviews were created and completed to identify those strengths and weaknesses. We were able to actually go to administrators on campuses and say, okay, this is what your teachers are doing well. This is an area that we need to work on. And having that in hand, physical evidence, like really being able to say just the compliance piece, right? Not even looking at what they're actually doing with students, but just compliance wise, what we can do, what do we do well, what do we need to work on? And then our next steps after year one was really about that Branching Minds infrastructure coaching. And within that infrastructure coaching, we were able to pull about 25 different people. I'm talking secondary, elementary, middle school, high school, central office people, classroom teachers, principals, counselors, a good group of people together to figure out exactly what it is that we do well, what do we need to fix, and created a handbook and created a document that outlines everything that we need to think about and do within this MTSS process. And so year one, a lot of data digging. One of those things that like I said, is the program review. And so this was created based on a lot of different fidelity checklists, a lot of different things like that, as well as like the special ed audit things that were going on, but really looking at these different areas. And I know the picture itself is small, but it's a lot, just looking at our platform. What are we using? How are we documenting what we need to? Talking about collaborating, documenting the collaborative meetings, documenting the parent notification, setting goals and tracking the data that's actually appropriate for those goals. So these are all the things that I kind of reviewed and talked about, and we do it at the beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of year. And then I meet with the RTI administrator on each campus to discuss and say, okay, here's where you scored. You're, red, yellow, orange. You're in that needs improvement, developing, or proficient area. If you're in the proficient area, this is what your next step should be to even keep you in there and go further with it. If you're in that developing, here's an area of improvement. Here's where you're doing well. If you're in that needs improvement area, we really started discussing a little bit more of, okay, what are the things that you have to fix? What are the things that compliance-wise, not even best practices, but just compliance-wise, that is not happening on your campus? And I did this elementary through high school. And so all levels got to kind of see where and when and what was going on there. I am going to send out one more poll for this presentation. And honestly, this is just trying to figure out where you guys are in your process. So how long have you been trying to implement MTSS practices in your school or district? Either 0 to 1 year, this is our first year, we're just getting into it, 2 to 4 years, 5 years or more, or what is MTSS? I'll give you guys a moment to kind of look at and answer that. If you go to the polls, the chat polls, people Q&A, go to polls, you can answer right in there. I know some of you guys are answering in the chat as well. We got several kind of mid-year, 2 to 4 years seems to be the majority of us. That's good. All right. So if anybody wants to in the chat, any questions about year one to kind of deepen any knowledge base about, what are some of the things that maybe in year one you were struggling with, or what are some of the things that if you're still in year one that you feel like, I can't believe we're still at this point and we can't get past this point. So in the chat, if you want to drop any of those comments as I go on to year two, we'll come back and kind of look at that as well. So looking at year two, our focus, really focusing on increasing that knowledge base about MTSS, campus level training on the new platform, continued program reviews for beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of the year. Looking at what was successful is really increase the awareness of what it was, increasing the usage in the new platform and the comfort level of people in that new platform. And for next steps, looking at increasing awareness and the district requirements or process, as well as creating campus level teams for MTSS. So year 2 was really about our new platform, furthering people's knowledge base. What is MTSS compared to RTI? How can we do that? What is the difference between it? Is it academics? Is it SEL? What's going on? Things like that. So really kind of focusing on this, right? What is RTI versus MTSS? How do we see that? How do we get people to understand the difference? And so I've done multiple trainings. Year 2, I was on campuses doing trainings all the time. And one of the biggest things is I talked about data dumping, right? Teachers don't like it when students data dump. Well, I was asking teachers to data dump. Data dump what you know about RTI. Let's talk about this from a blank slate kind of place, looking at what MTSS is. It's not about just those students that we want a special ed referral for. It was those students that were struggling academically, struggling behaviorally, struggling social emotionally, needed some sort of extra support, but also focusing on prevention, differentiation, as well as intervention, and really getting it down to that level and getting them to understand what that means. So I am going to go into the comments right here. We still have, let's see, it depends on who you ask. Felt like year 1, but it's more along the lines of year 4. Totally understand that, Jenna Davies. I feel like there are times where it's like, where have you been the last 4 years? Have you not been listening? All the time. It happens. What were some of the things you did to get staff to buy in? I think honestly, it was a lot of just me being there to support staff. It wasn't something where every year it was a different person that came to support them. Every year it was a different platform that they were using. I think it's been the consistency was a big part of it, as well as just, I hate to say this, but it's true. I think COVID helped with this because people were now thinking about MTSS differently and RTI differently because of that social emotional awareness, where people were like, okay, our students can't learn because they don't have the self-regulation tactics, because they don't have the social awareness, they don't have those skills that our students normally would have come to us with because they weren't around people for a good year, 2 years. And so I think that helped get people to understand that we have to look at more than just math and reading, and really just more than reading. I think math has always kind of gone to the wayside. And so just a lot of those conversations. Year 1, wondering where to begin, how to build a website for info, how to build data trackers and RTI referrals. I think that it really depends on what your district is using and how you're using it. I know there's still some districts that are very paper-based in a sense of maybe some Google Docs or spreadsheets and things like that. And I think that that hinders part of your progress only because it's not a good platform for everybody to be able to collaborate at one time, everybody to be able to see that data and that documentation. And so it really, having a platform that is user-friendly, that is visible to all that need to be able to see it, and really outlines your students as a whole child, not just whatever documentation the teachers are putting in, that really does help. I know Panorama is what we use. Branching Minds is another platform. Obviously, we're at the Branching Minds Summit, right? I think the Branching Minds platform itself is phenomenal. I think that, it's one of those platforms that our district is considering for future years. It's just a matter of really having something in place. The time, still struggling with time, totally understand, still struggling with time. I know for me, getting into the schools to be able to do the trainings and things like that, I've been lucky the last 2 years. And I say that because it doesn't always happen this way. But at the new teacher academy that we have for the district, I actually get 3 hours with our brand new teachers. And I talk to them about just this, right? RTI versus MTSS. What is it? Why do we do it? And then we get into like the how do we do it? How do we manage this? How do we document this? As well as our accelerated instruction for House Bill 4545 or 1416. And then at our back to school training, I have breakout sessions that I'm actually able to do with our teachers as they come back. But most of my campuses, and I want to say every single one of my campuses this year, had me come out to the campus and do a training, whether it was at a faculty meeting after school or whether it was during teachers conference time or the PLC planning time, that I come out and I do a session on, this year it was more of how do we document. Years prior, it was really about just this RTI versus MTSS. What do we do? How do we do it? What does this look like? It is very much so a mind shift, really changing that. Kind of moving on. Alrighty, so let's get into our year 3 and looking at what that looks like. The focus for year 3 really was about creating a team approach to MTSS at the campus level, continuing those program reviews, increasing district support to campuses. Really last year, what was successful for us was making sure that our campuses understood that it wasn't the administrator and the teacher. It was about a team, getting a team of people together to have these conversations, to communicate different things. And so I talked to all of our campuses, and we have an administrator, we have an academic support teacher, we have some sort of special ed representation, and we have our social worker or counselor. We're lucky in Southwest, and I know that we're lucky that we have a social worker at every single elementary campus, middle school campus, and high school campus, as well as counselors. And so we have those people in place to help with our SEL learning and teaching. And so we were able to really include them on those teams, as well as your truancy. We have truancy liaisons on RB campus. Our elementary schools do share. They're kind of on their feeder patterns. But our middle schools and high schools have a truancy specialist that is assigned to them and works with them for attendance purposes. And so having those people involved as well really does help, because a lot of times our students aren't learning because they're not here. And so we have to figure out, okay, what can we do to get them here? And that's a big part of it as well. I think that we were successful with that, creating those campus support teams and really making sure that people were comfortable within our new platform, being able to do our intervention plans and look at it and say, okay, what should a tier 2 intervention look like? What should a tier 3 intervention look like? And when we talk about increasing district support to campuses, yes, it was still me, myself, and I. Pre-K to 12 RTI coordinator for the entire district. I now had House Bill 4545 on top of it. And so my 1-lane highway went to a 2-lane highway. And I think that I was on campus. There were several campuses that actually called me to be there when they were doing their RTI meetings throughout the days. We had several campuses that used the morning block and had PLCs. And so it would be 4 days out of the week or 3 days out of the week, and then 2 weeks running, or it would be an all-day thing during their conference, or they would split it between 2 days, elementary-wise, where it was pre-K to 2 in one day, and then 3 to 5 in another day, and they'd had a floating sub, and so it was one teacher and that team of people. And so there was a lot of different ways to implement it within the campuses, but we were able to focus on having those deeper conversations and creating a team for it and having a larger aspect versus just one person talking to another person. And so that really worked out for us. Our next steps was really focusing on the secondary MTSS training, and unifying our online interventions. What we were doing as campuses, seemed like it was a hodgepodge of, we had iReady, we had IXL, we had Edgenuity, we had Imagine Math, it was Amplify, it was this, it was that. And so it was difficult for us in the district level to support campuses because it was all over the place as to what they used. And so one of the major steps for us for this school year was unifying, okay, what are we doing with those online interventions? What are we using? How are we going to monitor it? How are we going to support it? And things like that, as well as implementing a universal screener elementary through high school. And so focusing teams, big part of it, really making sure our campuses understood that it was all about teamwork. It was all about making sure we all came together. It wasn't one person versus another person. So we really made sure that that was our big piece in year 3. So talking about year 4, that's current. That's this year. This is what we're doing right now. Implementing that MTS at the secondary level district-wide, focusing on our middle schools and our high schools, getting out there, not just training them, but walking the walk with them step by step, as they're having their PLC planning time and they're using one of those days for RTI documentation, things like that, being there to support them. What does that look like? What does a plan for a middle school student look like? What does a plan for a high school student look like? And then we're starting to monitor interventions at the campus level. And by doing that, I actually have a teammate this year. This is the first year we're a team of 2 instead of a team of 1. And he is doing walkthroughs during intervention enrichment time, middle school, elementary school, high schools. And then we're discussing what was seen. And then we're looking at, okay, the teacher said they're doing this intervention, but this is what they were actually doing during the intervention time. Did we miss it? Did we not see it? What's going on? Why is there a disconnect between what they're saying they're doing and what they're actually doing? So it's a little bit less of the compliance and a little bit more of the implementation now. What interventions are we doing and how are we doing it? As well as having that unified online interventions district-wide and implementing that universal screener and increasing that district support. So really what's been successful so far is implementing that universal screener. We have NWA map growth as a universal screener this year. So it's K through 8 or Kinder all the way through Algebra 1 and then Kinder all the way through English 2 using NWA map growth. Honestly, what tipped the scales, map growth is something that I've been trying to get into our district for 3 years prior to it coming. What tipped that scale for us was TIA. And I know Texas, you probably understand what that means. Others might not. But TIA really is that teacher incentive allotment. They show growth with their students. They have the possibility of getting an extra, 10,000 to 16,000 or something like that. And so having that universal screener, though, has really given us an opportunity to see nationally normed, where are our students? What are our students struggling with? What are our students doing well with? What instructional areas are we hitting hard? What instructional areas overall as a district are lagging and not making growth? And so in January, I think January 9th through the 19th, right, we're going to have our first follow-up. So we had our first testing session in the fall. Our winter testing session will happen in January. So it'll be our first time for to be able to show growth and see, okay, our students growing? We're doing all this extra work. Are they growing? Are they doing better now or not? As well as Kinder through 8 are all using Imagine Learning MyPath, which is for reading and math. And so with all of us using the exact same online intervention platform and program, we're able to, 1, monitor the usage, and 2, focusing on, okay, what's working, what's not working, doing some fidelity research, finding out, is it helping our students or not helping our students? Is it user-friendly? Are we able to help our teachers with it? And so, honestly, in year 1, we're going to see, is it worth it? Is the investment worth it or not? And so it's been really good to have that K through 8. So the students have that same platform year to year. And so I'm hoping that we continue that from year to year. But right now, it so far looks pretty good. 6th through 12th grade have Progress Learning. And Progress Learning combined with another company, I don't remember what it was, USA Testing or something, but it has everything from reading, math, science, social studies, TSI prep, PSAT, SAT, and a lot more different prep kind of courses and things like that. And so using that for more of our social studies and our science and our reading and math for the secondary, for high school levels, but getting an opportunity to actually do some enrichment for those students that are, they passed our state assessment. So now they can do some enrichment within that same platform. And so all students can be working in the same platform. And it's not like, well, the students that have to do this are the ones that can't pass. So, so they don't know the difference as to who is doing enrichment and who's actually doing some interventions in that sense. So we've been really good with that look. So one of the things that we put out there for all of our campuses is some district expectations. What does that look like? So we have MyPath or Progress Learning Liftoff for reading and or math, interventions, House Bill 4545, and enrichment. So looking at NWA MAP growth, those students that were in the red, that first to 20th percentile, they're expected to have 90 minutes per week. And that could be 3 sessions for 30 minutes. And the same thing, 21 to 40th percentile in the orange, they have 60 minutes per week that they're required to do. And then 41st percentile to 60th percentile, we're asking them to do 45 minutes per week. And so this is something that we really, really made sure that we're monitoring week by week. We get a report from them, from MyPath on Mondays. We see, okay, what campuses aren't hitting their numbers. And then we have conversations with those campuses and say, okay, talk to me. What happened? What kept us from getting where we wanted to get? What are the teachers doing instead? So what I tell all my teachers and my campuses and my administrators, if you're not meeting your minutes in the platform, that is the teacher doing a small group intervention that's taking up the time instead of them having the time on the computer, because nothing's ever going to replace the teacher. Not a program, not a platform, nothing is ever going to do that. So we want to make sure that, we have those conversations with the campuses and talk to them, what is it that is happening? If this isn't happening on the computer, what is it that is happening? Are the teachers doing that small group intervention? Are we utilizing the, science research-based interventions? And if that's the case, then we're okay with it. But if that's not the case, then we have more questions, right? We have to make sure that, what's going on? Why are we not being able to do these things? And so for, district expectations, we put it out there. We make sure that they know. And then we also put out there, what are our expectations on RTI documentation now? So for the first to 20th percentile, what type of plan should they have in our platform? What does it look like? How often should they be working with those students? If they're getting 90 minutes per week on our program or platform, what are they doing as a teacher? Because the program is not going to be enough. We don't want that. We don't want the teachers to think, oh, well, they're getting on there, so I don't need to do anything. And that's one of the biggest things. We need to make sure that they understand that program is not going to replace you. So things like that. So looking forward, takeaways, objectives, participants learning how the infrastructure coaching helped, understanding the benefits of district-wide, and exploring our 5-year strategic plan, including where we are now. Going into some of the questions, I think Jennifer Lawson, looking back, what is something you would have done differently in year 1 to accelerate your plan? I think about this often because obviously year 4, and I feel like we're now starting to get ground underneath us to be able to move it. I don't think I could have accelerated it, and I hate to be kind of negative in any way, but I don't know what I could have done differently or how we could have accelerated it. I think the best quote that I've ever heard from anyone is, you have to go slow to go fast. And it takes time. This isn't something that's going to be overnight. It's not something that, in year 1, you're going to be able to see changes, make changes, and just go for it. What I've heard from everybody in, doing this is 3 to 5 years to really see the difference. And I started seeing the difference last year. I'm really seeing the difference this year. And, next year, obviously, hopefully we'll continue that. But it's definitely, you have to go slow to go fast. You're not going to be able to make a change overnight, because teachers need to see consistency. They need to know the why. And I think that having a good conversation about why is extremely important. And that's what the first 2 years of my work within the district has been. It's all been about the why. Why are we doing this? What is the real difference between RTI and MTSS? And that's when I started seeing a big difference. Brittany, Patton, how do you plan for teacher turnover when planning for trainings and implementation? Are you planning for differentiation? How would you determine who needs what? I think that's a great question, Brittany. The reason I think that's a great question is I think we have to take it one step higher. What are we doing about administrator turnover? You can get a campus going so well. They've got a process in place. They're doing great things. And then bam, you have a different administrator coming in. And so I know that when that happens, it disrupts the system for a minute, but then making sure that that new administrator gets really good onboarding. And that's one thing that I've been very targeted about, is making sure anytime we have a new administrator, I meet with them one-on-one. We do a couple of different things together. And then I'm side by side with them when they're talking about really making sure that we have those conversations together. And I work side by side with them during the RTI meetings. So they can see the questions that I'm asking, and they can hear the things that are going on. And so it's not just expecting them to know, because they're an administrator, they should know. We don't just expect them to know. We want to model the questioning. We want to make sure that they understand exactly who, what, where, who do we ask, why do we ask this question, things like that. And so we really have been side by side with those new administrators. Now, when it comes to teachers, like I said, for New Teacher Academy, I get them for 3 hours. They already have a device in front of them. They already have everything they need, the login and everything like that. And they're able to log into our platform and start kind of looking at it. And we create a fake plan together to get them some hands-on training. But we really talk about what is MTSS, RTI, and how do we see it differently? How do we talk about whole child? And so I do get those brand new baby teachers already. And then I go on to campuses and get into the how a lot more. And so that's one of the things, like the differentiation that really does happen, is making sure that when I go to campuses, if I am working with our pre-K and kinder teachers, I'm talking pre-K and kinder MTSS. What does that look like? If I'm talking to first grade, what does it look like for first grade? If I talk fifth grade, what does it look like for fifth grade? Same thing for middle school and high school. It's very differentiated as to the audience that I have. But then also, a lot of times whenever I go to middle schools, especially, it's funny. They'll be like, I remember you from New Teacher Academy. I was like, good. Do you remember anything I said? And some of them are like, no, I don't. And I said, that's okay, because I know New Teacher Academy is a fire hose to the face. And so we're going to go over some of that stuff now, but we're going to actually get you into the platform and start working. And so we do differentiate those things. And it's not a one-time thing ever. I go out to campuses multiple times. I have that one-time big-time training with the campuses, but then I'm with them and training and doing different things throughout the year as well. And so we're able to really focus on what works, what doesn't work, and what needs to change. Differentiation for non-core content teachers. So we're talking social studies, science, CTE, all those nice non-core content teachers. Whenever I'm talking to them and differentiating for them, it is a lot about the behavior, attendance, SEL, as well as getting them to start collaborating with other teachers from their grade level that do teach those students in those core content. But it's making sure that they understand they're not exempt from this. This isn't something that they don't have to do because they're not core content. They are just as involved in this process as our core content teachers. And that's one of the things that I think, year 2, I started to see a change. Year 3, I definitely, and this year I'm seeing a lot more of a change. Like I said, we have 4 middle schools. I have one middle school that has actually created an opportunity for the 6th grade team to come together and have these conversations. So that'll be your science, social studies, English, and math teachers. The 6th grade team will come together and have conversations about students. The 7th grade team will come together, the 8th grade team will come together. And so it's during a kind of a morning PLC time where they're able to, their first period is advisory. And so during that period, the classrooms that they can cover, they cover, but the students actually stay in the cafeteria with a device and get onto the intervention platform with a couple of people monitoring those classrooms while the teachers are having those conversations. And so they've been creative on being able to create time and places where they can have those conversations, all the 6th grade teachers at one time versus, just the English teachers meeting or just the math teachers meeting. So it's been really interesting. But I think it's getting other campuses to see that type of thing as well. And then Gabby, was there any other questions that I kind of missed in here? I see a couple of you guys have just moved over to MWA. Well, others moved over to STAR, now Acadians.
There are some Q&As, Danielle. If you want to answer that one first from Casey, go ahead, and then I'll let you know what the Q&A says.
From Casey, which one?
Do your MAP percentages you shared serve as automatic tier 2 placement? And or what other data in conjunction with MAP scores do you train your teachers to screen with?
So nothing is automatic, honestly. It does give them a pretty quick, and what I look at, so a lot of times this is a big part of my training too. Our old platform, ESPED, trained people's minds to see RTI as a very linear function. You have your tier 2, you have your tier follow-up, you have your tier 3, you have your tier 3 follow-up, and then you have referral. What I have been asking our teachers and our administrators and everybody to data dump all that and kind of replace it with this mindset of document what you're doing. If you're doing a tier 3 intervention, it's a tier 3 intervention. You don't have to start in tier 2. If you're starting in tier 2, that means you're not supporting the student as much as you think you should be supporting the student. Because we have to start in tier 2, we're going to just do a tier 2 intervention. Well, how is that fair to the student? Because if you did an intense intervention and documented your tier 3 intervention that you're doing, they might be able to go back to tier 1 right away and not need any more interventions. And so those are the conversations that we had. So when we talk about MAP percentages and tier 2 placement automatically, what I tell my teachers is those MAP percentages and the percentiles there, those are your baseline. Those are your universal screener, your baseline. And so now let's look at STAR scores. Let's look at common assessments done district-wide, common assessments done on the campus. If everything's saying the same thing, that this student is struggling, we're going to do interventions. Now it's a matter of finding out what intervention is going to be for this student. And we really talk about the students needing some foundational skills. So if we're looking at a student that is in 3rd grade and sounds, they're working on letter sounds, that's a student that needs tier 3 intervention. That is a skill that is a kinder skill. So it's 2+ years below grade level reading skills that the student needs. And so when I talk about, I think Naomi Garcia just asked that question too, how do you differentiate the interventions? I always tell them, if you're having to work on skills, foundational skills that are 2 years or more below grade level, you need to do a tier 3 intervention. That student is 2 to 3 years below grade level. You need to do more. Whenever you get to that point where it's like, okay, now I'm just working on, let's say, basic fluency stuff, but not blending and decoding and those things. But I'm getting into some basic fluency where we just need to increase their fluency, increase their words per minute. How do we get to that point for that 3rd grade student? If we get to that point, now we're looking at tier 2 interventions, right? We're not having to intervene as intensely. They've made really great grades. Let's do some tier 2, and then we can move them out and just say, tier 1 is going to be able to do that. So it really is about the student. And that's the one thing that I have been, hitting hard. What is it that we're doing? Is it individual for each student? Yes, we have groups of students and we can do group plans and we can do those things and make it easy. However, we have to individually say, what does this student need? And if we can't answer that question, then we haven't dug into our data enough. And we talk about data-driven decisions, right? I always tell teachers when I'm doing my trainings, when I have teachers come to MTSS meetings and they say, well, I feel like the students really struggle. And I'm like, that's great. You have feelings. I love that. What does the data say? Not to hurt your feelings, but what is the data telling you? And so getting them to realize that it's not about what they feel like the student is struggling in, but what exact skill, what exact thing are they struggling in? When it comes to reading or math, let's say math, well, they can't divide. Okay. Do they know their multiplication facts? Yes, they do. Okay. Can they subtract? What do you mean? Can they subtract across zeros? Can they do those things? Oh, no, they really do struggle with that. And I said, then that's your intervention. And they're like, oh, division's not your intervention. The subtraction's your intervention. So we have to find that skill, what's there. But having those conversations and asking those questions is the only way we're ever going to get to that point. And so when we get to that point and the teachers start talking about it and the teachers start seeing that it's, I'm not going to let up. I'm not going to say, oh, okay, that's what you feel. That's what we're going to do. I'm always going to ask those questions. And, yes, some teachers have gotten a little defensive. Like they feel like I'm questioning them. I'm not questioning them. I'm questioning to find out, how do we support the student? I'm digging deeper to find out, what does a student actually need? And if you can't tell me, then next week we'll come back, and I hope that you can, that you've looked into it more, that you've done some quick checks to see, okay, can they subtract across zeros? Can they add and regroup? Do they know their multiplication facts? Because if they don't know those things, then we're not going to be able to divide. Division's always going to be a struggle. And so how do we get them to that point? Same thing with reading. Do they know their letters? Do they know their letter sounds? Are they able to decode? Now are they able to blend? Those are the things that we need to figure out prior to saying, oh, we need to do a fluency goal. Okay. Tell me more. That's my favorite saying right now. Tell me more. And so we get to that point where they really understand, what do we need to do? And I think that's the biggest part, right? Just asking question after question after question until they figure it out on their own. And I say, oh, got it. That's what we need.
Yeah, I love that. Digging deeper, like you said, tell me more. Let's get to the root of the problem. That's wonderful. I know we have a little over 10 minutes left. There are 3 questions in the Q&A, Danielle, so I'm going to go with the first question was submitted by Jane Burton, and she asked, do you have differentiation tips for training non-core content teachers?
So I think we actually hit that one already, and we did talk about just making sure that they understand they're not exempt from this process. They might be looking at behaviors, SEL, attendance, and those things more so than that basic reading or math skills that you'll see in your core content, but making sure that they understand that they have just as much to do with MTSS as anybody else.
Perfect. The next one, Desmond Dawkins, let's see if this one got hit. Has there been a focus on Tier 1 instruction, or was there already a solid foundation in your division?
I giggle. I probably shouldn't, but I do. I giggle about it because that's one of the things that without a true universal screener that was nationally normed, it was difficult to say our Tier 1 instruction was high quality Tier 1 instruction or not. Mm-hmm. Now that we have this, we're being able to see those pockets where Tier 1 instruction obviously was an issue, right? Where we didn't have strong Tier 1 instruction, where at one campus, their second graders at the beginning of the year, 57% of them were in the red. They're in that 1st to 20th percentile. Now, what that tells me is that their first grade instruction was not great. And so we need to strengthen that first grade team. And, whether it's teacher attrition and people moving around, maternity leave, whatever it may have been that happened, then we have those conversations with the administrators and the academic coaches, as well as our core content, CNI people themselves. And so it's given us an opportunity to really hone in on where we were doing well and what we need to improve upon. And so they have been focusing a lot more this year on Tier 1 versus what they were doing in the past.
Awesome. Thank you. The next question comes from Abby Kahara. Do you reserve a Tier 3 designation for students and IEPs only?
No, and I think I kind of answered that whenever I talked about tier 2 versus tier 3, really focusing, getting teachers to understand and document the work you're doing. If you're doing a tier 3 intervention with a student, document it as a tier 3 intervention. So if I'm working with 2 students and I'm working with them 20 minutes, 3 days a week, that's pretty intense. I'm going to document that as an intense intervention. So we don't have tier 2 students and tier 3 students. We have students receiving interventions. Even like our PEMS department, right? Our, how we code our students for interventions, it's one code. Doesn't matter what tier they're receiving, doesn't matter what anything else, it's one code. It's intervention strategy 01. That's it. That's how you code a student in our state reporting and everything else. So why do we label tier 2 versus tier 3? And I always said, well, if they're receiving a tier 2 intervention in math, but they're receiving a tier 3 intervention in reading, what are they, a 2.5? How do you label students that thing? So we don't label our students with tier 2 or tier 3. We talk about what is the intervention, how are we doing that intervention, and that's how we decide are we going to document as tier 2 or document as tier 3. Our students that are in IEPs, those students that are receiving special education services already, we document them within MTSS, really focusing on their non-disability qualifiers. So let's say they qualified for reading, but they didn't qualify for math. Then if they're struggling in math and it's not because of the reading and it's computation, then we're going to document the computation interventions. Or if they're, SLD reading and math, but now behaviors are starting to pop up, we're going to start documenting some behavior interventions. Same thing for speech. If we have a speech student, they're starting to struggle in reading or math and it's not directly connected to the speech, then we're going to document those reading or math interventions that we're doing. And so it gives us the background knowledge and it gives us the documentation of these are the places the student is struggling, even though it's not by their IEP. We're still documenting what we're doing with that student. So I know I've heard Dr. Oganowski talk about it as a tier 3B plan. You have your tier 3A, your tier 3B. A is those students that are general education and things like that. B is those students that are identified as special ed, but not in the area that you're doing these interventions in. I was like, oh, that's interesting. You learn something new every day. A and B. I would never have thought of that. But I think that that's just how we kind of have to think about it, is making sure that we know that just because they're special ed doesn't mean that we don't do interventions. We really have to dig deeper onto those students.
Very true. Thank you. See, the last one I see here in the Q&A comes from Jessica Brewer. Going back to that focus on tier 1 instruction that you talked about, what are your thoughts and opinions on using a scripted tier 1 curriculum?
I understand there's a lot of people, especially in Texas, because the commissioner is really big about, well, teachers are spending too much time planning. They're spending too much of their own money. They're doing this, they're doing that. And so we're trying to send out, scripted tier 1 curriculums so they don't have to plan. They can just print out a lesson plan that's already pre-planned for them and just go directly off of that. And I say as a teacher, right? Because I think we're all teachers all the time, even admin, central office people, we're teachers. We're in education, we're teachers. As a teacher, if someone else writes my lesson plan, do I know it? If someone else writes my script, do I really know the content, or am I just regurgitating? And so when students have a misunderstanding, do I have the knowledge base to be able to address that misunderstanding well enough to make sure that they don't continue that misunderstanding all the way through high school? I mean, who knows? And so I understand the want. I understand the push for it is to help teachers, is to have them not have to plan as much. And, we're passing laws nowadays that about teacher planning and writing lesson plans and how many hours they can spend doing this and everything else. And I get that. And I 100% understand that. But at the same time, I think we're working harder instead of smarter. And I don't think a scripted tier 1 curriculum is going to fix it. So, my opinion.
Awesome. Thank you. We have a few more minutes, about 5 minutes left. So if anybody has any questions they want to post in the Q&A, I can read them out, or if you could put them in the chat and maybe Danielle can read them. But so far it's been great. Thank you, Danielle.
No problem. So the last couple slides, one is just the resources, kind of giving you what the things that we have used are the quick links page. I'm going to go ahead and click on that one just so everybody can kind of see what that looks like. I like to say this is my brain on a Google Doc. So it's everything that you could possibly need, anything that you could possibly think of that you need, all in one place. If you guys all have access to it using the link that's on the PowerPoint, on the PDF, and whenever you get into it, anything that you click on that you don't have access to, it's because it is just a district and district only type of thing. Anything else that you can click on and it opens up, I have it set to where anyone with a link can go ahead and get onto it and get into it. But we definitely want to make sure that like you guys have this. It's like I said, it's my brain on a Google Doc. I don't know how else to explain it, but it gives you guys an idea of kind of what we as a district and what I have done for the district and put together. The handbook is the handbook that we worked on and created through the Branching Minds infrastructure coaching. So it is like 75 pages. And I tell people all the time, I don't expect you to read it cover to cover. The table of contents is bookmarked, so you can click on where you want to go. It's always being updated, which is why I keep it as a Google Doc and not a printed document, because things change within a district, processes change, platforms change, things like that. And so I try to make sure I go through it at the beginning of every school year and middle of every school year. What do we need to update? What do we need to change? Things like that. And then other than that, any questions? We kind of went through. And then I know the before you go for you, Gabby.
Yes, definitely. There is one more question that we can probably get to in the last 2 minutes or so. Evan Bergman just wants to know, how has utilizing Branching Minds as your MTSS system impacted the effectiveness of your building level MTSS teams?
So as a district, we have not used Branching Minds platform. We use their infrastructure coaching. Sandra was our coach through that process, and she did a phenomenal job just organizing us and getting us through creating a handbook and what does that look like. We actually use Panorama Student Success. Like I said, Branching Minds is something that we are looking to in the future. We probably would have been a partner with them this year, but Panorama gave us a really good deal, and so it was kind of hard to walk away from. But that consistency in one platform has been very beneficial to our district. Branching Minds, like I said, if we move away from what we're in now, we'll probably move over into Branching Minds because it is that good, and I do really, really like it, but it's not what we use right now. So what we're using right now and how it's helped is it's very user-friendly. I can see at high levels how many students have what interventions. Are they meeting their goals? Are they meeting their minutes by HB 4545 standards? What are teachers documenting? How does that look? And then as well as like making sure that the compliance other pieces are in place. But
awesome. Thank you so much. So before we wrap up, we've got about a minute left. Here is some information for y'all before you go. If you'd like to sign up for our resources, follow us on social media, please do tag any of the sessions. There's our information for you right below or right in front of you. And don't forget, after this, there is a 15-minute break. Awesome.
And I think the link for the PDF, if you're on the video right now, if you just scroll down, you'll see in blue letters, all caps, access a PDF of session slides here. So you should be able to find that right underneath there.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. And Danielle, as always, it's a pleasure. Thank you and enjoy the rest of day one.